In less than a month in office, the Trump administration has taken significant steps to dismantle foreign aid programs that support fragile democracies abroad and has placed federal workers who protect U.S. elections at home on administrative leave. These actions, according to current and former officials, represent a stark departure from decades of American commitments to promoting democracy and human rights globally. The implications of these decisions are far-reaching, affecting not only the United States' standing in the world, but also the security of its own democratic processes. The erosion of foreign aid programs. The United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and the State Department, the primary vehicles for U.S. foreign aid, have halted funding for programs focused on democracy and human rights. According to multiple sources familiar with the matter, the State Department has also laid off about 6 contractors who were working on these critical issues. These cuts have raised concerns among current and former U.S. officials, who warn that the damage to democracies around the world will be felt for years to come. Shannon Green, who until January was a senior USAID official focused on democracy and human rights, expressed deep concern over the administration's actions. The U.S. government's credibility as a defender of democracy, as a supporter for human rights, is so tarnished because of all of this, Green said. It may never be able to recover. It's a massive betrayal of the trust that foreign allies put in us and the commitments that we've made to them. The Trump administration's decision to freeze foreign aid has created a chaotic situation within the U.S. government. Employees working on foreign aid programs describe a lack of reliable guidance from their superiors on how to reorient multi-billion-dollar programs on the fly. For example, USAID officials trying to evacuate their families from the Democratic Republic of Congo amid dangerous riots, said in court filings that they don't know if they would get reimbursed for emergency expenses. You can't move $44 billion worth of taxpayers' dollars around without issuing guidance, one U.S. official said, referring to the amount USAID disbursed in fiscal 2023. This isn't a startup. The State Department has long provided digital security tools, such as VPN software, to protect dissidents in repressive countries. Any disruption in these programs can have catastrophic consequences. Any kind of disruption in that space can be catastrophic, a U.S. official said. A State Department spokesperson did not answer specific questions about how much democracy-focused foreign aid has been paused. However, the spokesperson stated in an email that each foreign aid program is undergoing a review with the goal of restructuring assistance to serve U.S. interests. Programs that serve our nation's interests will continue. However, programs that aren't aligned with our national interest will not, the spokesperson said. Despite these assurances, the freeze on foreign aid has left many human rights defenders and activists in limbo. Green, who previously spent over a decade at USAID across Republican and Democratic administrations, warned that people in war zones or other countries that rely on the U.S. government for physical protection could be left vulnerable. They're human beings, human rights defenders, activists, who have up until this point been receiving emergency support and assistance from USAID and the State Department. Green said, U.S. government-backed efforts to evacuate human rights defenders or move them to safe houses are in jeopardy. The impact on global democracy. The cuts to foreign aid programs have been welcomed by some autocratic governments, such as Russia, which has long viewed U.S. efforts to promote democracy as a threat to its own authoritarian regime. US-funded media, outlets like Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, which have been a thorn in the side of autocratic regimes, could also be at risk. Elon Musk's recent call for their closure has raised concerns that these outlets could be next on the chopping block. The damage to global democracy from the foreign aid cuts is not just a short-term issue. Current and former US officials warn that the long-term consequences could be severe. The US government's credibility as a defender of democracy, as a supporter for human rights, is so tarnished because of all of this, Green said. It may never be able to recover. The administration's approach to foreign aid represents a significant shift from previous administrations, both Republican and Democratic, which have consistently supported democracy and human rights as core components of US foreign policy. The current administration's focus on restructuring assistance to serve US interests, as defined by the Trump team, raises questions about the future of US leadership in promoting democracy around the world. Cuts to election protections at home. While the Trump administration has been cutting foreign aid programs that support democracy abroad, it has also taken steps to undermine efforts to protect US elections at home. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has placed several employees of its Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CSA, on administrative leave. These employees have been instrumental in protecting US elections from foreign and domestic threats. In a memo to employees on Friday, CISA senior career official Bridget Bean announced that the agency was halting all of its election security programs with state and local elections officers until a review could be completed. The review is intended to ensure that CISA's activities comply with an executive order from President Trump to correct past instances of federal censorship. The sweeping review will cover all of DHS work to protect elections since 2017, when the department formally declared elections to be critical infrastructure, following Russia's interference in the 2016 election. The moratorium on election security work even extends to funding for a threat-sharing center that has, for years, shared intelligence with elections officials about domestic and foreign cyber attacks. The decision to place CISA's election specialists on leave has raised concerns among election security experts. David Levine, a senior fellow at the University of Maryland's Center for Democracy and Civic Engagement, argued that the move could create openings for foreign operatives interested in targeting US elections. Foreign adversaries and other bad actors are licking their chops as they watch the current administration remove individuals who have been key to protecting American elections and encouraging the spread of democracy around the world, Levine said. Cutting CISA and USAID's election teams risks hastening the decline of the once high regard for American democracy, and with it, America's leadership and moral authority. Levine, who previously served as an election official in Idaho, warned that the Trump administration's actions could have long-term consequences for the security of US elections. The US has long been seen as a beacon of democracy, but these actions risk undermining that reputation, Levine said. If we can't protect our own elections, how can we expect other countries to follow our lead? The broader implications for US democracy. The Trump administration's cuts to foreign aid programs and election protections at home are part of a broader pattern of undermining democratic institutions and norms. The administration's focus on restructuring assistance to serve US interests, as defined by the Trump team, raises questions about the future of US leadership in promoting democracy around the world. The cuts to foreign aid programs have been welcomed by some autocratic governments, such as Russia, which has long viewed US efforts to promote democracy as a threat to its own authoritarian regime. US-funded media outlets like Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, which have been a thorn in the side of autocratic regimes, could also be at risk. Elon Musk's recent call for their closure has raised concerns that these outlets could be next on the chopping block. The damage to global democracy from the foreign aid cuts is not just a short-term issue. Current and former US officials warn that the long-term consequences could be severe. The US government's credibility as a defender of democracy, as a supporter for human rights, is so tarnished because of all of this, Green said. It may never be able to recover. The Trump administration's approach to foreign aid represents a significant shift from previous administrations, both Republican and Democratic, which have consistently supported democracy and human rights as core components of US foreign policy. The current administration's focus on restructuring assistance to serve US interests, as defined by the Trump team, raises questions about the future of US leadership in promoting democracy around the world. In-depth analysis of specific court cases where the Trump administration has defied judicial rulings, including the legal arguments presented by both sides and the broader implications of these cases. Historical analysis, a more comprehensive exploration of historical instances where the executive branch has clashed with the judiciary, including the lessons learned from these episodes and their relevance to the current crisis. Expert opinions, interviews with constitutional scholars, legal experts, and historians, providing diverse perspectives on the crisis and its potential outcomes. Public reaction, an examination of how the American public, the media, and civil society organizations are responding to the crisis, including protests, advocacy efforts, and public opinion polls. International implications, an analysis of how the constitutional crisis is being perceived internationally, including its impact on America's global standing and the potential for similar challenges in other democracies. Legal reforms, a discussion of potential legal and constitutional reforms that could strengthen the judiciary and prevent future crises, including proposals for amending the Constitution or enacting new legislation. Role of technology, an exploration of how technology, including social media and artificial intelligence, is shaping the crisis, including the role of platforms like X, formerly Twitter, in amplifying the administration's message and the potential for technology to be used to uphold the rule of law. Long-term consequences, a forward-looking analysis of the potential long-term consequences of the crisis, including its impact on future administrations, the judiciary, and the broader political landscape.